Now that I have your attention, I don't like it, not hints of flirtations in Mystery of the Batwoman, and especially not overt doing it in the Killing Joke movie. But I understand why the Bruce-Babs relationship exists in these stories. I'm just a couple of years older than Batman the Animated Series, and I'd say people my age, maybe a little younger, when they think of Batman in the comics, they think of the post-crisis Batman. For the layman, that means from 1985 to 1986, there was the granddaddy of all comic book events, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Following Crisis, we had George Perez's Wonder Woman, John Byrne's Man of Steel, and Frank Miller's Batman Year One. These stories were kind of meant to clear away stories that no longer meshed with the direction the creators wanted to take the characters. Often you'll hear someone differentiate between pre-crisis and post-crisis. Pre-crisis Superman is more powerful, pre-crisis Batman is a little friendlier with the law, etc. Post-crisis Barbara Gordon is younger than pre-crisis Barbara. Pre-crisis Barbara Gordon was a congresswoman, and Bruce Wayne, at least according to Frank Miller, was eternally 29. Around the time Barbara was in Congress, Dick Grayson was in college. But David Mazzucchelli and Frank Miller's Batman Year One changed things. That story has a younger Jim Gordon coming to Gotham with his pregnant wife, and she wasn't even pregnant with Barbara, but a son. But this doesn't fly since Bruce is only 25 at the time of Year One, and he'd have to be pushing 50 by the time Barbara is an adult crime fighter. And while no hard and fast age has been set for Batman in the present day, he's not quite that old. Other creators address this later by saying post-crisis Barbara is actually Jim Gordon's niece who he later adopted. We see in Robin Year One and Batgirl Year One, set roughly 4 and 5 years after Batman Year One, Barbara is about the same age as Dick Grayson. So now Bruce Wayne is about 30, while Barbara Gordon is about 12 or 13. It's understandable people would be grossed out at even hints of Bruce and Barbara being a thing, when the comics happening concurrently with the DC Animated Universe Batman portray Barbara as being almost 20 years younger than Bruce. But these guys who worked on these stories where Bruce and Babs are a thing, they grew up on the pre-crisis Batman comics, most likely the ones from the late 70s, early 80s, where characters you know from the DC Animated Universe, like Hamilton Hill and Arthur Reeves, were recurring members of the Batman supporting cast. They were naturally drawing from the Batman comics they fondly remembered when bringing Batman to a new generation. That's where my understanding but not liking this pairing comes in. But even though I'm confident this era where Barbara is closer in age to Bruce than Dick was pretty influential on the DC Animated Universe's creators, Barbara in the DC Animated Universe is closer in age to Dick than Bruce. Dick Grayson is in college in the episode Fear of Victory, while Barbara is in college in the episode Batgirl Returns. Bruce's age is a little harder to nail down. In the audio commentary for the Batman Beyond episode Rebirth Part 1, Bruce Timm said,
"Well, as far as I'm concerned, Batman Beyond takes place 50 years from now, whenever now is."
Yeah, he's how old do we decide he was?
I say he's 80.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I know the network never wanted to say how old he was, and, they didn't want him to be old and decrepit.
Which would mean Bruce is about 30-ish in the present-day DC Animated Universe, roughly 10 years older than Dick and Barbara. According to Robin's Reckoning, Bruce first took Dick in 9 years earlier, which, I'm not completely sold that someone in their early 20s would be able to take in someone half their age, but maybe he greased the right palms. This is Gotham. They're not concerned with following the right procedures. Now, something mentioned in an audio commentary shouldn't automatically be accepted as canon. The commentary for the film Batman Gotham Knight, there was disagreement on whether the movie was supposed to be set in the Nolanverse. But in this case, this gives us a good idea of what was going through the minds of some of the creators behind these shows. If we accept the math from this commentary as fact, Bruce isn't that much older than Barbara. You probably know some real-life couples with this age gap. And other than one naughty dream from Barbara in Batgirl Returns and some light flirting over the phone in Mystery of the Batwoman, flirting that isn't reciprocated, there isn't much of a relationship between Bruce and Barbara. In the Batman Beyond episode A Touch of Curare, we find out Barbara and Bruce eventually became a couple, but that could have been several years after she graduated college. While the age gap would still be the same, someone in their mid-20s will be a little more emotionally mature than someone in their late teens, early 20s. And while I did not like the addition of the prologue to the animated Killing Joke film for a number of reasons, this film is in its own little world, not connected to the DC Animated Universe. We don't know how old Barbara is supposed to be in this movie. Since two of the producers also worked on Batman the Animated Series, it's possible they were thinking back to the pre-crisis Batman comics where the age gap between these two isn't as pronounced. Then you have the Batman Beyond digital first series from a decade ago where it's revealed Bruce got Barbara pregnant, and it suggested this happened during a time where Barbara might have been involved with Dick also. This is pretty messed up, but if I was offered work on a Batman Beyond comic and it was never overtly explained why we never saw Dick Grayson in Batman Beyond, this is a good reason for him to be angry enough to cut ties with the rest of the Bat family, even so far as to not not be there looking for the missing Tim Drake in the flashbacks in Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. Kyle Higgins, writer of this issue, says this series is a continuation of the Batman Beyond cartoon and is not some weird combination of the DC animated universe with the DC Comics world, which we got later when Terry McGinnis is folded into the main DC universe. So even though it may hurt our hearts for Dick to be betrayed like this, an enormous age gap is not the reason we should hate this development. So where does this leave us? For me, about the same place I was when we started this video. If I was making a Batman cartoon, I'd probably be looking at the post-crisis stories that lay out Batman's early years as a template, where Barbara is significantly younger than Bruce. Bruce has enough women in his life without adding this complication that frankly makes 2/3 of this love triangle incredibly unlikable. But the idea of these two hooking up in the context of this animated series and with no context at all in the Killing Joke movie, the idea isn't enough to make me want to throw up. The execution, yes, but the idea, no. I hope this cleared things up, and even if it didn't, I'll see you in the future with some other video. Until then, have a good one.